Ladies and gentlemen, you have to ask yourself a logical question. Is the GNU actually going to hold? But before we get onto the main video, can I kindly remind you that over 80% of our audience is not subscribed. And it would really help us if you would subscribe, like this video, and possibly share it with others. This will help us on our journey to 100,000 subscribers. So before we get into the main video, I thought I'd actually give you a little bit of an update on some of the stories that we covered. In yesterday's video, we covered the Olympics opening ceremony. Well, it now turns out that the individual who portrayed Jesus in the debacle is a French DJ. And the French DJ says that she is now filing a complaint with prosecutors over cyberbullying and death threats that she received during her performance, because obviously the online backlash has been quite severe from the world's 2.1 billion Christians. Her name was Barbara Bush, and she was featured amongst a number of exotic dancers and drag queens. Many noticed that the depiction was that of the Last Supper, but some of the organizers claim that's not the case. It was actually a pagan feast, and it was meant to cause no offense or be disrespectful to no one, except the individual that stood at the head of the table actually had the lights of Christ around her, as is depicted in many of the historical arts from the Enlightenment period. So one has to ask the question, if you knew you were doing a role that you yourself have deliberately said was done to be provocative, when you got a backlash, you then claim to be a victim. But onto more news that doesn't make sense. If you saw, we did a video last week, and in that video, we basically highlighted the EFF member who said, and I quote, "I want to moor a boer." Well, this said individual has now come out because of the public backlash and said that the comment was not aimed at the Afrikaans community as a whole, it was aimed at a single Freedom Front Plus member. So that makes it so much better, right? I mean, it wasn't aimed at everybody, it was just that guy. And they just want his blood, but no one else's blood. These comments don't make you look any less guilty, bud. These don't help your case. And on to other news that doesn't make sense. Tommy Robinson is a UK journalist, and he released a video called Silenced. In this video, it's basically a documentary around how him and his family have been doxxed. If you haven't actually watched the video, it's actually very good, and it shows you just exactly how poor the UK current political environment is. For those of you who are thinking, maybe I should move to the UK, watch this documentary. It's very harrowing, and it shows the exact experience that him and many others have received. Now, Tommy Robinson was actually banned from showing the documentary because the establishment didn't want it to become mainstream. He has now released the documentary, and as a result, he has had charges filed against him for terrorism. Elon Musk commented on X. He asked the logical question of what terrorist-related offenses have Tommy actually done, apart from exposing the establishment. And as a result of releasing the documentary, Tommy Robinson's had to flee the country. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't watched the video, I really would suggest go find it. You can find it on Rumble, and there are still many people who are streaming it on YouTube, but it's well worth your time. So, onto the main story. The main story is, will the GNU hold? So, Sean Jacobs, who writes for the Daily Investor, wrote a piece. What it is it warns of Ramaphoria version 2. He says that since the election of Ramaphosa, there has been a mood change in the country, and that mood change has meant that many people feel more positive about the environment. But what he cautions against is that if economic transformation does not occur, if the relevant structural reforms that are required to make South Africa a better place do not occur, all we will have is a repeat of Ramaphoria. And this could ultimately be disastrous. So why exactly is this an important article? Well, on the same day that he released that article, news came out that Total plan to exit gas in South Africa, which potentially could cost the South African government around 100 billion in lost taxes. Those taxes obviously sorely needed to pay social grants and housing and all the other economic development that the country needs. Now, a number of reasons were given for the departure of Total, and many of them should come as no surprise. Things such as technical difficulties, commercial viability, the inability to get an off-take agreement which allows them to do forms of drilling and exploration. Many of these things we've seen all over the country in terms of the Shell strikes. Shell complained of many of the same things. However, one of the big problems that they highlighted was actually Petro SA's credibility, referencing dubious contracts that it has with the Russian Gazprom Bank and the now liquidated Equator Holdings. The job opportunities that Total would have brought, as well as the cost saving against fuel imports, was something the South Africans need sorely. both to improve quality of life and reduce the cost of living. To see another state-owned enterprise being responsible for yet again another entity wishing to exit South Africa is, one, no surprising, but two, rather disappointing given the change in mood with many people experiencing a degree of Ramaphoria, a renewed optimism in the country. Unfortunately, that optimism, as Sean recounts, isn't enough to get us through economic problems and economic stagnation. What is truly needed in the country is reform, and reform even to the state-owned enterprises. And without this, companies will continue to exit the country. So what then exactly is the president attempting to do to help fix the republic? Well, the first thing that the president did today was actually sign the new procurement laws. The new procurement laws basically state that there is a procurement policy that the entire state has to follow in order for procurement to be lawful. The president claims that this will help him stop corruption, because everybody will have to follow the exact same playbook in order to go through procurement of state-owned services and equipment and goods. However, the Western Cape government and Cyberbullying both say that's not going to be the case. In fact, what it actually does is it stops individuals setting their own procurement framework and actually highlighting the things that are important to them. You see, unfortunately, what the procurement framework does is it highlights all the usual things that we're used to seeing. Black economic empowerment, empowerment of black women, disabled individuals. White is always excluded because he's historically advantaged and doesn't need any more of a leg up. You can see this in the parties that were critical of the bill and the parties that lauded it. Black Business Council came out and said it was a historic moment in our democracy when the procurement framework was signed. And maybe now, according to them, more black individuals would see their lives transformed and would be uplifted. One has to ask the relevant question of what else has been occurring over the last 30 years, if not just that. Sakalika predictably said it was the government's way of just trying to continue the cater deployment network and finding new ways to commit corruption against the state. So the question I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, if the government is responsible for a centralized procurement program, would they use it inevitably to commit fraud and extend the patronage network? You let me know in the comment section below. But I know what my answer is. Now, the signing of this document was not unproblematic, with many saying that it was against the DA's best wishes. In other words, the DA didn't actually want the centralized control or being in the hands of the government. They inevitably wanted some degree of subdelegation so that the local provincial governments could set their own procurement framework, like the Western Cape. And this has led some to argue that the GNU is not long for this earth. Because, as we can see, time and time again, there are ideological differences between the ANC and the DA. So I have to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, will the GNU hold? Well, according to MK and the EFF, the ANC of Ramaphosa is collapsing South Africa. According to the EFF, the ANC are mismanaging the economy and helping crime soar. According to MK, the GNU are helping private entities soar and allowing poverty to get worse in the country. Not sure how you have both at the same time, where you have one mismanaging the economy and another saying actually they're doing fine with private enterprises, but they're not concentrating the poor enough. One has to ask the question, what is the economy in these individuals' eyes? I suppose it's the state and the poor. I suppose they really, really like the poor. That's why they continue to want to constantly create more of them. So, let's look if there's any validity to these actual allegations. Well, first of all, in KZN, the Premier there said that they would be setting aside ideological differences in order to have a depoliticized solution that would help the entire province go forward and have forms of betterment for everyone. Very interesting take in KZN. Let us contrast this to the DA in Gauteng, who said that they would not be supporting the provincial budgetary votes, which would inevitably collapse their local government structure, and their rationale for this is that the budgets were not in the best interest of the people, basically because the DA is not in government there, apart from the Speaker. So the question really becomes, will the GNU collapse? Will it actually last the 5 years that it's meant to be in office? And actually that's a very interesting question, because many individuals inside the ANC are actually complaining about the GNU, and it's not always ideological differences. According to some individuals in the ANC, the DA and the Patriotic Alliance are vastly outperforming their ANC counterparts. They're doing things. They're trying to do economic reforms that would better the country as a whole. And in the process of doing this, making the ANC look actually bad. And according to these individuals, who are part of the National Executive Committee, the very senior parts of the ANC, they would prefer a collapse in the government. They don't really want the DA and the PA making the ANC look bad. and in the process making them look good. So will the government and national unity last the full 5 years? And in many respects, I would say to Sean that he's asking the wrong question. The actual question we need to ask is, will Ramaphosa survive next year's elective conference? Because it's at that conference that everything gets to be reset. If Ramaphosa is no longer president of the ANC, if it goes on to somebody else who doesn't favour a GNU, then inevitably the GNU itself will collapse. But that's just my views. You let me know what you think in the comment section below. Will the GNU last? I myself am apathetic to the entire question. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But you let me know what you think in the comment sections below. Also, let me know what you think. Have you watched Tommy Robinson's documentary? What do you think about the whole Paris Olympics debacle? What do you think about the comments from the EFF individual? With that all being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Until next time, bye.